Lesson 6.11, we are on division of decimals by whole numbers. Today we're going to be able to discuss how estimation can be used to place the decimal point when dividing decimals by whole numbers. And we're also going to be able to perform operations with multi-digit whole numbers and with decimals to hundredths. Let's start off with a warm-up of rounding the number to the given place value. Write 63 and 89 hundredths, round it to the nearest whole number. Write 107 and 8 thousandths, round it to the nearest tenth. And the last one will be to write 0 and 105 thousandths and round it to the nearest hundredth. You can pause your video and then come back. For the first one, 63 and 89 hundredths, it was supposed to round to the nearest whole number. So when we're looking at that, remember that 8, the tenths place, is going to tell us what to do with the ones place. And so I know that 8 is larger than 5. So this is actually going to round up to 64. For the second one, 107 and 8 hundredths, rounding it to the nearest tenth. So we know that this is the tenths place is the 0. And again, the 8, the digit 8 is going to be, it's in the hundredths place, it's going to tell the 0 what to do. So this one, we are rounding up again to 107 and 1/10. And finally, the third one, for 105 thousandths, we're rounding it to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to look at that 0 again, and the 5 is going to tell us what to do. We know that if it's 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, it rounds up. So we're going to round it up to 0.11 or 0 and 11 hundredths. Our math message today says 4 siblings bought their parents an anniversary gift that cost $84.12, including tax. If they split the cost equally, how much did each sibling pay? So let's go ahead and look at this. We've got 4, because if you remember, when we have a story problem, we want to use cubes. I wish my handwriting on here was better. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to circle all the numbers. So I see 4, $84.12. They split equally. Okay, so I've circled all the numbers. I'm going to underline the question. So how much did each sibling pay? And this part is part of the question. It's important information if they split the cost equally. So I'm actually going to box in split and equally. And now I need to evaluate and solve. So when you take a look at a question like this, we see that we've got 4 siblings. So we're going to split the cost. What was the cost? The cost was $84.12. And we're going to split it up. We know that when we see split, we are going to do division. So we're going to divide that by 4 people or 4 siblings. So when we look at some strategies to solve a question like this, you can think about the dollars first. $80 divided by 4 is $20 each. And then that $4 that's left over can be divided by 4, which is $1 each. So each sibling would pay $21. Then we think about the cents. We can take 12 cents divided by 4, and that's 3 cents a person. So each sibling would pay $21 plus that 3 cents to give us a total of $21.03. And what you can do is, again, think of it. They've got 80, and then they've got 4, and then they have the 12 cents. And that's how they got the 84.12. And so they divided this part by 4, this part divided by 4, and the change was divided by 4. And that was their thinking for this. And then they added each partial quotient. Another strategy would maybe thinking about giving different bills and coins. So each sibling could give a $20 bill, and that would be the $80. Then they could each give a dollar bill, and that would be $84 total. And then they could each give 3 pennies, and that gives the $84.12 in all. And each sibling would come to the same amount of $21.03. And one more strategy would look like this. You could think about the pennies, $84.12, is the same as 8,412 pennies. You can use partial quotient division to divide 8,412 by 4. So you can see here, this is their thinking. So each sibling would pay 2,103 pennies, because we just ignore the decimal. And so you see 2,103 pennies, but we know that 2,103 pennies is the same as $21.03. You can think of that, and it's much like with the multiplication. You can think of how many decimal places did I take away or did I move? I did 2, so I want to put back the decimal place within that 2. And remember, you can always do your estimation to help you think through that as well. So if you had 84, you could do 80 divided by 4, which would give you 20 with your estimate. And so if 20 is your estimate, then you would know to put your decimal place between the 1 and the 0 to give you $21.03. So when you solve problems involving money, you're working with decimals in real world context. You evenly distribute money in the math message problem, you solve the decimal division problem 84 and 12 hundredths, or 84.12 divided by 4. In the last few lessons, you have been multiplying decimals. I want you to think about 2 strategies you have learned for multiplying those decimals. If you need to look back in your previous lessons' work, that will be very helpful for you. So today's lesson, we're going to practice using an estimation strategy to divide decimals by whole numbers, just like we did in the math message. In lesson 6-9, you solved multiplication problems like 1 and 2 tenths times 8 tenths, and you got 96 hundredths, which is the same as same digits used, and 12 times 8, which gave us 96. You remember that rule of if the digits used are in the same order in both problems, the digits in the answer are going to be in the same order of the answer. This is also true in division problems. So something to think about is if the divisors and the dividends in 2 division problems have the same digits in the same order, so will the quotients. And you could see that in our math message right here. When we ignored the decimal, but we still had the same digits in the same order, we still were able to get the same answer. This means that you can use a similar strategy to divide decimals as you did to multiply. Let's review the multiplication strategy, but change it to indicate division. So the strategy that we have for multiplication is the same as for division. You start with an estimate. You make an estimate. So here's one that they did for this problem, and just like I did. They did 80 divided by 4. The second step, remember, is to divide as if the dividend were a whole number. So think of 84 and 12 hundredths, the same thing as 8,412. And so you would solve 8,412 divided by 4. And you get 2,103. Then, like I said earlier, you use that estimate to place the decimal point. Ask yourself, the answer should be close to our estimate of 20, so where should I place that decimal point? And just like I showed you a minute ago, your decimal point should go after the 1 and before the 0 to give us $21.03. That's close to 20. If we put it anywhere else, it would throw it completely off. If we put it between the 2 and the 1, it would make it 2. If we put it between the 0 and the 3, that would make it in the hundreds. So let's use that strategy for this problem here. Sophie had 6 and 42 meters of ribbon that she cut into 3 equal length pieces. How long was each piece? So you want to use the strategy that we just talked about to solve this problem. You've got 6.42 divided by 3 equal pieces? Pause the video and work that out. So for that one, hopefully you wrote a number model that appeared like this one, 6.42 divided by 3 equals some variable, so P. To make an estimate, a sample estimate for this problem would be 6 divided by 3. That would be the easiest one we could do in our head. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So we know that our final answer should be around 2. Now we're going to ignore that decimal, and we're going to divide as if it was a whole number. So we're going to take 642 divided by 3. And you should get 214. Well, we know that each piece is not 214. So using that estimate of 2, we want to figure out where would we put our decimal here? Would we put it after the 4, between the 1 and the 4, between the 2 and the 1, or before the 2? Hopefully, knowing that our answer needs to be around 2, you know to put it between the 2 and the 1 to give us an answer of 2.14. So then to answer the question, how long is each piece of ribbon? 2.14 meters, or 2 and 14 hundredths of a meter. So if we had used 9 divided by 3 equals 3 as our estimate, would we still have been able to estimate our place value? How would you know? Estimates only need to be precise, remember. They only need to be enough to help determine, precise enough to help determine whether the quotient is in the ones, the tens, the hundreds. So even if we did 9 divided by 3, we still would have been able to get the correct answer, because if you look back at this, if we would have had 9 divided by 3 equals 3, that still tells us that needs to be in the ones place. And no matter where we put the decimal, it still will tell us. If we put it here, that'd be the hundreds. If we put it here, it'd be the tens. And if we put it here, it ends up in the ones. So that's how we can, it doesn't matter with your estimate, as long as you're in the correct area. So Brandy bought 1.27, or 1 and 27 hundredths pounds of mixed nuts. She divided the nuts equally into 4 bags. How many pounds of nuts are in each bag? So again, I want to look at the numbers that are here. So we are dividing 1.27 pounds into 4 bags. And so we want to figure out how many pounds are in each bag. So before we even move on, let's identify a number model. We should have 1.27 divided by 4. And if we use our thinking, our logical thinking here, we know that if we are taking a number and we are dividing it, our answer is going to be smaller. So the number model again was 1.27 divided by 4. Estimate would be 1 divided by 4, or 1/4, which is less than 1. So you know that each bag is going to be less than a pound. And what we did here is we ignored the decimal. We did 127 divided by 4, got an answer of 31, as you can see here. But using our estimate of 1/4, or less than 1, where would we put our decimal? Would we put it after the 1, between the 3 and the 1, or before the 3? Using this estimate. So when we see this symbol here, it means it's about equal. It means it's not exact. It's a rough range. So where knowing our estimate of 1/4 or less than 1, and knowing that this means about, where would we put the decimal place? Because 32 is the quotient for 127 divided by 4, rounded to the nearest whole number. 0.32 is the quotient for 1.27 divided by 4, because that is rounded to the nearest hundred. You want to think about how many places you moved that decimal. So turn to page 224, 225 in your Math Journal 2, and you are going to complete this problem on your own using that strategy. So you're going to do number 1, about 3 sisters with $8.46. Number 2, about Janine. Number 3, just giving us a problem, no story problem here. Number 4 is a story problem, or just a number sentence. Number 5, 6. Okay, so pause your video, work on those problems on 224, 225, and then come back and check them with me. All right, taking a look at number 1, 3 sisters set up a lemonade stand. On Wednesday, they made $8.46. If they share the money equally, how much will each sister get? You should have had a number model of 8.46 divided by 3 equals some letter variable. Our estimate could be 8 divided by 4 equals 2, with the final answer of $2.82. Number 2, Janine is building a bookshelf. She has a board that is 6.77 meters long. She wants to cut it into 5 pieces of equal length. How long will each piece be? Number model of 6.77 divided by 5 equals P. For piece, our estimate was 5 divided by 5. That would be the easiest one, and that equals 1. So that's just telling us the place value that our final answer should be in. So remember that your estimate does not have to be, this didn't have to be 7. It doesn't have to be rounded to the nearest whole number. It can be rounded to the nearest benchmark. That's easy for you to do an estimate, which once you do 6.77 or 677 divided by 5 and you finish moving the decimal back, you get 1.35 or 1 35 hundredths. Number 3, this was just 9 44 hundredths divided by 4. If you did an estimate, that would be 10 divided by 5, which equals 2. After you do the actual math of 9.44 divided by 4, you get 2 36 hundredths. Number 4, 46 8/10 divided by 12. We could do an estimate of 50 divided by 10, and that tells us 5. So it tells us it should be in the ones place, giving us an answer of 3.9 or 3 9/10. Number 5, 89 9/10 divided by 4. You could have rounded that to 100 divided by 4 for an easy estimate of 25, telling us it should be in the tens place, giving us a final answer of 22 5/10. And finally, number 6 was 253 7/10 divided by 6. An easy estimate would be 250 divided by 5 equals 50, with a final answer telling us it should be in the tens place of 42 3/10. That is the end of our lesson. Remember, today our focus was the division of decimals by whole numbers. We were able to use estimation to help us place the decimal point when dividing a whole number. We also were able to perform operations with multi-digit whole numbers and with decimals to the hundredth.